Hello everyone, this is David, Fairly Secret Music. The other day I did a King Crimson 101 video and that got some really good feedback. So I decided I didn't have much that I was buying. I got a couple more King Crimson things and Merciful Fate, Into the Shadows. But I thought, you know what? Let's do a Jethro Tull one. So, um, let's just start. We'll go through you know, and I have these deluxe editions. There are versions like this, which is a 2-disc set. Um, which has the whole album in mono, and disc 2 is the whole album in stereo. And these ones have 4 discs. Well, some of them only have 3 or 2 discs, but usually they have about 4 discs. They have these really thick booklets, all the lyrics, the whole album in 5.1 surround sound. So this album, this is their first album, and they had a guitarist named, oh God, what was his name? Of course, I don't remember what his name was. Mick Abrams. And he was more of a blues guitarist throughout his career. He left Jethro Tull after this album, and then they got a guy named Martin Barre, or Martin Barre. It's Barre. He was a perfect fit for every new idea that Ian Anderson came up with. And a lot of people think of Jethro Tull as this guy right here. That's Ian Anderson, the singer. That is actually Martin on guitar. We'll talk about this later. But this was a very blues-based album. Some really great stuff on it, like My Sunday Feeling and Beggar's Farm. Let's see, Song for Jeffrey. Just a lot of really good stuff. You could hear where they got some of their influences, but it was so unique. And Ian Anderson started playing flute right before this. And I'm going to go through these and kind of tell you which ones I think I would listen to first if I had never really listened to Jethro Tull. But I mean, honestly, this is one that you could start with, but it's not a good representation of the rest of the career. I have no idea. I didn't set this up so I could easily move things around. So, one second. These things make it a lot more difficult. Their second album, Stand Up. Honestly, I think if you were going to listen to them for the very first time, Stand Up is probably one of the best places to start. There's, of course, the 4-disc version. And these things aren't as expensive as one would think. I mean, I think they're like, you can get them, if they're not out of print, you can get them for like $45 or something like that. But with this, you are getting the whole album, new mix by Steve Wilson, disc 2, a whole live concert, and then the DVD audio is the whole album in 5.1 with tons of bonus tracks. Originally, when they were doing the 5.1s, like Thick as a Brick came out in a $140 box set with the Blu-ray. They have since remedied that outrageous price. But Stand Up came like this. This is 2 CDs and a DVD. And I believe, yes, this does have it. I think both versions have it. So the album's called Stand Up, and when you open it up, you have a stand-up version of the band. Now, this is where they kind of moved away from the really blues-based kind of stuff. Well, the first album was blues-based, and this kind of just moves away from it. But I wouldn't call them a blues band at any point. But this album has New Day Yesterday, Fat Man, For 1,000 Mothers, Jeffrey Goes to Leicester Square, Boree, which is an instrumental that goes do 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 do. I have been seeing used versions of this since this thing came out recently. So, I mean, this is 2 discs and a DVD. You cannot go wrong with that purchase. This is probably my favorite Jethro Tull album. Wait. So, Mick Abrams leaves. Don't like that. Mick Abrams leaves. They get Martin Barr. They also have Clive Bunker on drums. He's this guy sitting down. Let's see if I can find a picture of the band. Alright, so you got, from left to right, you got Ian Anderson, Martin Barre. Glenn Cornick is the guy without the hat in the middle. And the guy on, our right is Clive Bunker. He was a fantastic drummer, but he actually left Jethro Tull because he fell in love with a girl and decided he wanted to be with her more than he wanted to be in the band. And then they replaced him with a guy named Barrymore Barlow, and because I know I have a lot of metal watchers, Barrymore Barlow played drums on the very first Yngwie Malmsteen album, Rising Force. So, he is awesome on that album. At this point, that's right, because the company was dumb. So this is their second album. This is their third album. And this is the only one so far that doesn't come in one of these crazy books. They even did a version slightly like this without the 5.1 of Aqualung, which I had at one point. But it didn't have the 5.1. This is the only version of the Jethro Tull discography up to Heavy Horses, because they haven't gone past that yet. That isn't in one of these books, but it does have the whole album in 5.1 with a second disc and a DVD of the whole album, 5.1. This is one of the albums that I've always had a hard time really getting into, but recently I have enjoyed this a lot more when I listen to it. To Cry You a Song is fantastic. Nothing to Say. There's one song that goes like and I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it's no, it's not To Cry You a Song. I'm really bad with the song titles on here, but there's a lot of crazy good stuff I think around this time they did the song. Oh God, I can't remember. It was a single, and they put it out, and it was in like 7/8 time signature, and you never hear time signature or hit singles released in odd time, basically. Um, Most people will know Jethro Tull because of Aqualung. This album has 3 really amazing songs on it. Um, I also have 2 different versions of this. The reason I keep this version is because there is an interview with Ian Anderson at the end of this that I will listen to every few years. Same thing with Thick as a Brick. One part of the interview is with Ian Anderson, the other is with Martin Barr and Jeffrey Hammond, who was their bass player at the time of Thick as a Brick. And I believe on this, because Glenn Cornick got kicked out of the band by Ian Anderson after the Benefit album, which is the one that has never seen the light of day in that book form. So third album is Benefit. But the 3 songs on here, if you decide you want to check out Aqualung, or as he pronounces it, Aqualung, Mother Goose, Cheap Day Return, Mother Goose, and Wandering Aloud. It's like a trilogy of acoustic numbers that are fantastic. My God is an amazing song. It's so good. The lyrics are super smart. The music is awesome, and when the whole band kicks in, it is so great. All you Iron Maiden fans will recognize the second song on this, Cross-Eyed Mary, which was a cover that Iron Maiden did in the early 80s. I like the Jethro Tull version way better, even though I heard Cross-Eyed Mary from them first. Oops, sorry. So, Jethro Tull got shoved into the whole prog rock category. I don't really think of them as a prog rock band. I keep them in my prog rock section because it's just easier to find them that way. But they really weren't all that prog rocky, you know. I mean, because you think of prog rock, you think of Yes, you think of Genesis, you think of King Crimson, and those bands have qualities of more symphonic stuff. Jethro Tull really didn't so much until they get to the Thick as the Brick album, which is what, their 5th album? And this album is one long song. That is an awesome idea, except for when you stay in the same, it's pretty much the same key throughout the whole song, and it is somewhat repetitious. There is there is a version of Thick as a Brick live at the Madison Square Garden show that's only 11 minutes long, because normally Thick as a Brick in total is 43 minutes and 50 seconds long, but they do a small version of the album, like a condensed version, and that's actually a little bit more enjoyable. The first, I would say, first 6-7 minutes of this album are fantastic. Just builds and builds, and Barrymore Barlow's drumming on this album is fantastic. unfortunately, it kind of gets repetitious to me. Um, they followed that with Passion Play, which was again another concept album, but not quite as um, not quite as tunnel vision, because Thick as a Brick kind of comes across more as like one big long song, where this is more of separate songs, so they change up keys a bit more. And I could be wrong. Thick as a Brick might change keys at some point, but it's very much kind of in that bum bum ba da dum 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 da 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 kind of motif, and that's why I get a little bit bored with it after a while. Um, this album, I'm really bad with song titles from here to probably the next 4 albums or 3 albums, um, with 1 or 2 exceptions. Uh, Passion Play, I believe this was the album that they recorded at a chateau in France because they wanted to get away from the British taxes of recording an album, and those recordings ended up being, for the longest time, this CD called Nightcap. They called this the Chateau Disaster Tapes because they weren't happy with any of it. And for a long time, they weren't released. But when they put this out, they decided to add it to it, which is cool. Sorry, I don't have any room to move here. War Child is one of the albums that I kind of reluctantly bought in these forms. I wasn't going to get this and another one, but then I decided, no, I will regret it, and I'm sure glad I did, because some of these have went from $45 to like $120 almost overnight, and because they went out of print fairly quickly. So I keep on getting them as, this has a song called Bungle in the Jungle, which is funny because my friend Dylan used to go, Bungle in the Jungle! And so now that's in my head. This, I believe, was also kind of a loose concept thing. But War Child and Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die are the 2 that I'm least familiar with. So I think it goes without saying those are 2 that I would suggest the least. Minstrel in the Gallery is one of the last real concept albums, but this thing has Minstrel in the Gallery, Cold Wind to Valhalla, Summer Day Sands. There's so many. Cold Wind to Valhalla is fantastic. I often confuse this with the Passion Play one because they are or were so kind of interchangeable to me at first, but now this one definitely is a highlight in the discography. Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. This one is tough. This one, I think they were trying to do a TV show or something like that. So he had a concept and about a rocker who was kind of past his prime or something like that. Um, this has a lot of kind of filler to me. Um, there are a few songs on here that are really good standout tracks, but I could not tell you. I have to really listen to this and War Child a lot more. Those are the two albums that I'm kind of, just lacking knowledge of. Now we start getting to ones that I was really excited about. Um, Songs from the Wood. The title track on this is worth the price of admission. I think I actually kept my version. Did I give this? I worked with a guy who he would give me his David Cronenberg DVDs when he got Blu-rays, and I would give him the original CDs when I got these versions. I stopped doing that because I realized I like having both versions. But Songs from the Wood, Jack and the Green, The Whistler, Jack and the Green, and Songs from the Wood, such great harmonies in that song. That is a standout track, definitely. And they do that is kind of like the opening, the third or fourth song on this, which is them live at the Madison Square Garden, which I believe is the video version of Bursting Out, which was one of the few live albums in the 70s that they did. But this has most of the show on video for live television, and then you also get a CD. So if you're interested in a live show, this is like them at the top of their game in like 1978. And there's also a documentary. I can't remember the title exactly, but it is quite a long documentary with interviews with every living member of Jethro Tull at the time. And a lot of people kind of come off as not wanting anything to do with Mr. Ian Anderson here. I think he burned a lot of bridges, but it's a business. This was the one that I was waiting for the longest time, and it is Heavy Horses. Possibly one of my favorite Jethro Tull albums. This is just riddled with goodness. I still kept my smaller version. And the Mouse Police Never Sleeps, Acres Wild, No Lullaby, Moths, The Rover, the title track, Heavy Horses. I mean, just this whole album is fantastic. This is with the lineup of where they were a 6-piece, and you had Barrymore Barlow. Well, you can't see that. Barrymore Barlow, Ian Anderson, John Evans, Glasscock was the bass player's name, I can't remember. David Palmer, who now is D. Palmer, and Martin Barr. This was the last album that their bass player played on. He was their third bass player, and he was having heart problems, and he was a partier, and He didn't want to stop the rock and roll lifestyle, and it pretty much bit him in the ass. So uh, he was really good friends with Barrymore Barlow. Whoops. Really good friends with Barrymore Barlow, the drummer. And watching that DVD documentary, you can still tell that Barrymore or Barry Barlow, has not gotten over the death of his friend. Uh, the follow-up to Heavy Horses is Stormwatch. Ian Anderson ended up playing bass on everything but 2 tracks on this album. This is a fantastic album. Very late in the game. This was the very last album with kind of like the core Jethro Tull lineup, when you would think of Jethro Tull as a band rather than as Ian Anderson. This has, I believe, no, Eddie Jobson shows up on the next album. But this has like North Sea Oil, Orion, Dark Ages. Yeah, this is a fantastic album, and Barrymore Barlow's drumming on this is fantastic. It's just phenomenal. So after that one, Ian Anderson decided he wanted to do a solo project. Unfortunately, he asked Martin Barr to play guitar on it. Well, fortunately, he asked him to play on there. Unfortunately, though, the record company convinced him to call it Jethro Tull rather than Ian Anderson, because the album's called A. And he's got Eddie Jobson on violin and keyboards, Martin Barr on guitar, Mark Craney on drums, and I'm not quite sure who he had on bass. Let me see. Oh, Dave Pegg, which is obvious because Dave Pegg ended up being in the band for quite a long time. This is another one that I am not quite familiar with. This version comes with a DVD of a live show called Slipstream. Yeah, this one I cannot remember any song titles to tell you which songs to listen to. Let me see what I want to do here. Broadsword and the Beast. This is one that a lot of Tull fans really thought was like a return to form. I think it's pretty good. I love the cover. The cover looks like it should be like a Blind Guardian album. But this does have, Beastie and the Clasp, Broadsword. Bonus tracks are Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow. I don't know if that was a B-side or not. This is a good later period one, like post-70s, because this one came out, I believe, in the 80s. Let's see. This is probably a pretty boring video, actually, now that I think of it. Under Wraps. This is the only album that doesn't have actual acoustic drums. And in the liner notes to this album, Ian Anderson comments on that, wishing that they had acoustic drums. I hope they make a version like this of it. I hope they go through the end of the Jethro Tull discography with these 5.1 surround sounds. But I would really like them to do what King Crimson just did on Reconstruction of Light, and go back and re-record drums, acoustic drums, because it does hurt the album, I think. Saboteur, Lap of Luxury, those are probably the two. This is the point where I get kind of hazy on song titles. Whereas the first few, yeah, I could tell you. This has a song, album Budapest on it. This is Crest of the Knave. So they did finally have an actual drummer on this one. Everybody's going to remember this. Jethro Tull, Rock Island, the album that beat out Metallica for Best Heavy Metal Band. And Ian Anderson said, well, the flute is a heavy metal instrument. This album is actually pretty good. You know, oh God, worst thing ever. Put the song titles in a circle around there with none of them numbered. Kissing Willie, the title track. This also has bonus tracks live from Zurich, Cheap Day Return, Mother Goose, and Locomotive Breath. Those are worth price of admission. I have all the remastered versions, just in case you're wondering. This is one that the next three are ones that I purchased because I finally found the digitally remastered versions, but I've only listened to them maybe once. Catfish Rising, Roots and Branches, and this one has never been put in as the remaster version. This is technically it's called .com. What a dumb title. jtull.com. Technically the last Jethro Tull album. And then after that, Ian Anderson did Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson, Thick as a Brick 2, which again has 2 discs. Let's see, what is this? DVD, I believe this is in 5.1. Yep, it's a surround sound mix. And if I didn't tell you before, which I didn't, the original Thick as a Brick, the idea for the concept was it was a newspaper written by this kid right here. Well, Thick as a Brick 2 is him as a grown-up and another story with him. And then Ian Anderson did Homo Erectus, which is essentially another Jethro Tull album, which is pretty cool, actually. Some honorable mentions in their discography. Aqualung Live. This is them in a recording studio or a radio studio. And they did this to aid various charities for the homeless. Best of the Acoustic Jethro Tull. And of course, Cheap Day Return, Mother Goose, and Wandering Aloud is in there. And that is pretty much it. Oh, Jethro Tull live at Montreux. Luckily, this was 2003, so Ian's voice in the studio is still pretty good, but live it's a little rough because, well, the rigors of being on the road. So, if you were deciding, hey, I'm going to check out Jethro Tull, what ones would I tell you to get? Stand Up, Aqualung, Minstrel in the Gallery. I guess I can take this down. And Heavy Horses. Those are the 4 that I think are the best and a good representation of the different kind of styles, even though they are fairly similar. Once you get familiar with Jethro Tull, you'll then know, oh, this is kind of their concept album. This is their more back to nature album. This is their kind of rockin' album. And um, Aqualung is just all over the place, and it's fantastic. So that was your Jethro Tull 101. Let me know if you want me to do more of these. I was thinking of doing one for maybe Gentle Giant, or maybe even Rush or somebody like that. Vandergraaf Generator, something. I'm in a prog mood. Um, you know, I know everybody likes metal, and these don't probably get as much views, but it actually has, like that King Crimson video actually kind of pulled some people in, um, especially because King Crimson stuff on YouTube is kind of far and few between, because nobody can use samples of any King Crimson stuff. Um, but I never use samples anyway. So let me know if you kind of discovered Jethro Tull for the first time. And they did have a box set. Um, what is it called? I think 20 Years of Jethro Tull. I think it came out in 89 or something like that. Because their first album wasn't, yep, 68. So it came out in 88. That was the very first Jethro Tull thing that I ever bought. And it's over there, and I forgot to grab it. So, let me know. Let me know what you think. Bye-bye.